Hello, Algebra 1 students. This lesson is going to cover Chapter 1.3, which, as you can see, covers the order of operations. I know this is a subject that's familiar to some of you. Likewise, this phrase, oops, that was supposed to be covered up, my apologies. There. This phrase, "Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally," may be familiar to some of you. If it's not, if the word PEMDAS is not familiar to you, this can help you to remember it. Each first letter, "Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally," is one of the letters in PEMDAS. PEMDAS itself is very helpful in keeping you straight on the order that you're supposed to follow in implementing operations in algebra problems, in math problems in general. So memorize PEMDAS. P itself stands for parentheses. Now actually it could be other kinds of grouping symbols such as brackets, but we tend to remember P for parentheses. And what we mean here is if you see operations inside parentheses, do those first before you do operations outside the parentheses. Once you've dealt with the operations inside parentheses, the next thing you look for is exponents. Once exponents are out of the way, you look for multiplication and division operations. In this case, notice I put this dash here. It's not supposed to be subtraction, just like there's a dash here and a dash here. What I mean here is multiplication and division actually come together. And what you're going to look for is whichever of these operations is on the left. We'll see some examples of this in a few minutes, but if you see division on the left before you see multiplication, go ahead and do the division first. After you've dealt with multiplication and division, the last things left are addition and subtraction. Don't work on any operations that involve addition and subtraction until you've dealt with all of these above it first. The textbook presents things in a slightly different way. Rather than even use the term PEMDAS, they give you 4 steps. First, do the operations that incur within grouping symbols. Now, in their case, grouping symbols, they're referring to parentheses and brackets and other kinds of we'll talk about some other grouping symbols in a second. After that, then you evaluate powers. That's the exponents I talked about before. Then you do multiplication and division from left to right. Then you do addition and subtraction from left to right. It's up to you whether you prefer PEMDAS or this green box as your reminder about the proper way to follow the order of operations. But either way, you need to memorize one. Now I said I was going to tell you about some other kinds of grouping symbols. Well, one type of grouping symbol is a fraction bar. So for example, in this expression right here, 1 plus 2 divided by 4 minus 1, the fraction bar divides the two. You have to do the 1 plus 2 first, and you also have to do the 4 minus 1 before you do any kind of division. So you go ahead and put 1 and 2 together, you get 3. You get 4 minus 1, you get 3 here, and you're actually doing 3 divided by 3. And your answer is going to turn out to be 1. Okay, let's see. There. Now, regardless of whether you think of it as PEMDAS, or if you call that P a G and call it GEMDAS, G for grouping symbols, and regardless of whether you see it as a word, or instead you see it as a shape here, with the grouping symbols first, exponents second, and then this is a group of things, and this is a group of things. Also remember to work left to right. Let's talk about what to do if several operations have the same priority. What if you have this left to right responsibility? And it comes up to you. So for example, what happens if you have to both multiply and divide? What happens if you have to both add and subtract in a particular problem? Well, let's look at one. Following the left to right rule, 16 divided by 4 times 2. Admittedly, in the word PEMDAS, M, multiplication, does come before D, but that doesn't matter in this case because, like I said before, multiplication and division work left to right. 16 divided by 4 is 4, and 4 times 2 is 8. That's the right answer. Look at what would have happened, though, if you had done the multiplication first. If you had done that first, you would have had 8 here. And you would have done 16 divided by 8 you would have said the answer was 2, which is not correct. So that left to right rule is very important, and it often is forgotten by the people who've done nothing more than memorize the word PEMDAS. You have to go beyond that. Okay, let's practice now. Here's an expression without parentheses. And how would you solve that? Well, if there are no parentheses, then the first thing I look for is exponents. So that becomes 16. Now that I've dealt with the exponent, I've got next to look for multiplication or division. Well, I've got a multiplication and I've got a division, but I've got the multiplication first. So this 3 times 16, well, that's 48. And I'm dealing with limited space on my slide here, so I'm just going to make it all fit here. Now I've got addition and I've got division. Division comes before. So I've got 8 divided by 4, which is 2. Now that's gone. And I'm left with 48 plus 2, or in other words, 50. Now let's bring parentheses into the problem, though. What happens if you do have parentheses? Well, here are 3 examples. There's the exact same set of numbers, but this time I've got parentheses here. Here, again, the exact same set of numbers, but I've moved the parens. And a third one here. What I'd like you to do is pause the video right here and work out each of these 3 yourself. After you've done that, come back and I'll show you the correct answer. So go ahead and hit the pause button now. Okay, I'm going to assume that you've done that, and I'll show you the answer to the first one. The first one you should have come out with 18 as your answer. The second one, 50. And the third one, 54. If you have questions about this, bring those questions into class, and we'll talk them when we get together. Here are some more practices. This time I'm going to plug in. I've got 16 divided by something called x minus 2, but I'm going to plug in 4 for x. Second example, I'm going to plug in place of a, I'm going to plug in 11, and so on. I'll do the first one. I plug in 4 for x, and now I've got 16 divided by 4 minus the 2. Okay, now the next thing that I'm going to do is actually conduct the operation 16 divided by 4, which is 4. That would come before my subtraction. 4 minus 2 is 2, and that's my answer. Now I'm going to go back, and I'm going to have you do the one with a in it and the one with n in it. So like before, when you're ready, hit the pause button, and then when you're done, come back and I'll show you the correct answers. Okay, I'm going to assume that you've done that, so let's move this curtain down. If I plug in 11 for a, I should end up finally with the answer 17. 22 divided by 11 is 2. This 2 divided by 2 is 1. 1 plus 16 is 17. How about the last one? This one was more challenging. I plug in 8 for n, but notice the equation that I'm given now, or the expression, is 16 divided by 8 plus 2 to the third power minus 10. Well, there are no parens, so then the first operation is going to be this exponent operation here, this power. 2 to the third is 8. You should be able to figure that out with pencil and paper without even using a calculator. Okay, so that's 8. Now I can do 16 divided by 8. That's 2. Now I've got 2 plus 8 minus 10. And if I carry that all the way through, I'll find that the answer is 0. So I hope you came out with 17 for this one and 0 for the other. Let's see what your calculator would have done if you'd been allowed to use a calculator on this. Go ahead and plug this in. 10.5 minus 6.3 divided by 2.1 minus 1.4, and see what you get. I'll have you hit the pause button and then come right back. Okay, I'm going to assume that you've done that and are back. If your calculator told you 0.6, then your calculator did not apply the rules of PEMDAS. It simply did each of the operations in order from left to right. But if your calculator told you 6.1, then your calculator knew that it needed to do the follow the PEMDAS order of operations, so it did 6.3 divided by 2.1 first. So many calculators will tell you 0.6. They're perfectly fine. You just need to know about your own calculator that it's not going to do PEMDAS for you. But many of the calculators that are out there that are used by many of our students do perform PEMDAS for them. So those students would have gotten 6.1. Okay, that's it for this video. This is your homework. I'd like you to do all 12 of these problems and bring the answers in with the worked out solutions to class the next time we meet.